there were a number of reasons why I wanted to have a more flexible way to do Excel refreshable workbooks. Everybody uses smart lists, and when you work with a smart list and you've got the data selected that you're interested in, and I'm just going to take an easy one here, the financial and the account list. So here, and I'm going to stop. We've got about 5,000 accounts. It doesn't really matter. But this list you can export to Excel anytime. Anything that you got on screen can be exported to Excel. If I do that, however, I stopped the readout of the data at 350 rows, and that is all I've got in Excel. So you'd have to, in Smart List, if you've got a lot of data, you'd have to change the number of records that are selected by the Smart List, and then you'd have to sit and wait, because 5,000 rows would take a while for it to percolate through. So that was one reason I wanted something more flexible in Excel. I'm going to throw this away. If you go to the Excel reports, I wanted to switch to a different company here. And fortunately, I have one of our Excel licenses. This will take a moment to come up. But when you, if you're in any of the GP areas, finance or sales or purchasing, each one of those areas has a list of Excel reports that you can look at that use the same views, the same SQL views that Smart Lists do. There's a correspondence there between the types of Smart Lists that are available to you, and Smart List, of course, gives you a lot of flexibility with selecting conditions, to filter the list of rows that you get returned. Whereas the Excel reports will, I'm going to go into sales and look at my list of Excel reports for the sales area, and I'm in the Fabricam company. And when we get the list of reports, we'll see, let's say, customers. I want to get the right one because I don't want the connections. And actually, I'm going to filter this out. I don't know if you do this or not, but I really don't like using connections. That's just a preference of my own. But I only want to see the reports. And okay. Okay, the customer's default. If I double click on that, and it'll go into Excel, and it will produce the list of customers from a SQL query, and this is refreshable. I know that because I can go into the Data tab and look at the queries and connections, and I can see directly what data is being extracted from SQL. And I'm showing you click by click where I go to get to it. I right-clicked on the connection and then shows properties. I get this 3-tab dialog box. The middle one is the important one. A lot of stuff in here, but the important part of it is this command text. And it shows the SQL statement that selects the columns that we want to see, and here they're arranged conveniently in a stack, and it tells me what view is used to produce this list, and it also puts it in order by the customer number. So that's pretty clear cut. But these Excel workbooks are a little bit limited in that it brings in all the data from GP. Now imagine those of you that are working in larger companies and you look at your account transactions Excel report in the financial area. And if I go to the Excel reports there is a Excel report for account transactions. Okay, that's the connections and account transactions default right here. Now I happen to know, because I looked, that when I open that sheet, it gives me about 22,000 general ledger transactions. There are some companies, the last one I worked for was WOW Logistics, and I think we've got a couple of WOW people here today. If you go into the financial area and open up an Excel report on the account transactions at the WOW company, that's over 1 million transactions. Excel crashes. It'll take a long time before it crashes because it's trying to display 1 million transactions, but it gets to that limit and then crash. That's a problem. You cannot, from the Excel reports view, filter that out in any way right here. There's no way to filter it. What you see here at the top where you're adding a filter, all that is it filters out which reports are displayed. Like I did earlier, I changed the option to contain this so that I would see only the Excel reports themselves without the connections. That filter does nothing for the data that is returned in the Excel workbook. Okay, I'm going to go back to this spreadsheet where I see the fields that are returned from the customer's view. We can, if you have a little bit of moxie with SQL, and it doesn't take much to develop that. You just have to know what the fields are. If you don't know what the fields are in a particular view, you can cheat. I'm going to select all of this stuff in that command text window, and I'm going to type select star, meaning every column from customers. Okay, now I click OK, and it warns me that this connection file will no longer be valid because that's a set of parameters that provide you the list that we're looking at right now. It just tells you that, okay, this is not going to be in effect anymore. Do you want to proceed with changes? Yes, I do. Now, it just did it, but I don't see anything right away. What happened? What happened was that we get all the columns now that are associated with the customers, every single one. And you see that we're going out to, oh my gosh, how many columns have we got here? Go to the end, we're all the way out to FZ. The advantage of doing this is you not only see the first several columns that were already in that view, but you might want to add something. You might want to add something related to the account numbers for that customer, or see what their average days to pay statistics are. So all of this is coming from live GP data, and you can now make use of it. Okay, I see all these columns. I'm going to jot down a few of these, like the cost of goods account number, who the contact person is, and there's probably a phone number in here too. I'll jot the names of those columns down, and let's say I just want the contact person right there. It's spelled contact space person. Fine. I go back into the queries and connections, and I right-click on the connection and click properties. By the way, this is being recorded, so if I'm going too fast, don't sweat it, because we're recording the presentation. And then in the definition, I see select star from customers. Then here you have the option of putting in the actual fields that you want to see. So customer number and customer name, there's no no requirement that those field names be on separate lines. But I'm just going to put these three. Contact person. I'm putting them in square brackets as opposed to curly braces. They're in square brackets because there are spaces in the names. You may already know that, but some people may not. So I'm selecting those three columns from, let's get the right keys here, from customers. Okay. So now I'm seeing nothing. Oh, that's because I'm way out at column A, D, whatever. I go back to column A and I see those three columns that I picked. So you can alter the default query that comes from GP, but there are some limits, and one of the limits is that, especially as I mentioned with the account transactions, if you pull that from the report here, it brings everything, and if you got more than 1 million, well, you crash. It would be nice to be able to restrict the range of data that is extracted from GP. That's why I went to I created my own template for making refreshable workbooks. So I'm not going to save that. I'm going to open Excel, and I'm going to open the template that I created, and you'll be very surprised at how simple the template looks. I call it placeholder GLC. That's my company. That's the one I want to open. That's it. It is an Excel table that has one column and one row, and it's the field name is just field 1. What does that look like? In the queries and connections, because that's like the key for making this work, the queries and connections properties for this particular refreshable workbook, it shows me that the table that's displayed is a select statement, a SQL select statement, but it's just a space. I've got a space with single quotes around it. SQL likes single quotes, not double quotes, whereas Excel likes double quotes, right? Since we're using a SQL query, that's the command type we have here, then it expects SQL syntax. SQL syntax requires single quotes around character strings. And then I'm calling the field 1. All right. The other important thing about this is the connection string up here. Now I have already prepared these are the 4 critical items that make this template work. I'm going to copy them and put them here in this box, replace what's there. This is all that you really need for a refreshable Excel report template to work. I need to tell it what database driver to use. And just about every Windows PC on Earth has the plain Jane SQL Server driver. That's what this is here. Now note the syntax of this. We have the name, the word driver, followed by an equal sign, and then what is the driver called. Okay, in this case it's SQL Server. Then there's a semicolon. Again, that's part of the syntax. I have them on separate lines, but you can certainly string them together if you want. I just like this because it's easier to read. The next parameter is the server. That is your SQL Server itself, where you've got your GP data stored. Ours is called GLCSQL2. Again, followed by a semicolon. There's no spaces in here around the equal signs. That's part of the syntax as well. Then I've got a real important one, trusted connection. Trusted connection with an underscore in between the 2 words is equal to yes. That makes this work the simplest. And what do I mean by trusted connection? That means that you, as a user, have the rights to extract data from the SQL Server outside of GP. I don't need to be in GP to get this data. The sheets that we were looking at come from GP, and there are GP rights kind of built into them. But for this to work, you need to check with your database administrator to see whether you have got a trusted connection. Do you have a direct connection to the SQL Server? If you have that, then this will all work. Okay, so I put the word yes after the equal sign because I'm an authorized user of SQL Server. You don't have to be an administrator. I've got these refreshable Excel reports that I've built by hand, distributed all around the company. And then finally, what's the database? Okay, the data for this is coming from the TWO database, the TWO GP database. Then I change the query. I'm going to select star from account transactions. That's the one I told you don't use willy-nilly, but I'm going to use it here because it's a limited number of rows. It's 22,000 rows, and it doesn't take very long to retrieve. Here it's telling me that the query is running in the background, but it does only take a few seconds. And there it is. Okay, a couple notes. I would change the name of the query here, so I'm going to put account transactions and say OK. So that changes it there. It's a little easier to spot that way. And then I'm going to save the workbook, because otherwise you'll save it over your template. I don't want the template to be saved with this stuff in it. I just want it with that little tiny one row, one column table. So I'm going to do a file save as and put it in a convenient place. So account transactions for TWO is what I'll call it. Okay, now how do we make this really useful? I'm going to insert a couple of rows here at the top of the table, and I'm going to put a parameter. I want this table of 22,000 rows, and I'll show you. I'm going to go down to the bottom, 22,200 blah blah, a whole bunch. It contains transactions. This is the sample company for a 6-year period from 2013 to 2018. Now I can do this and select just 2014, and it will filter out all those transactions just like that. Trouble is, the data that is in this table still is all 22,000 transactions. If you've got 1 million financial transactions and you try to bring that into Excel all in a wad, well, you're going to have trouble. Excel will crash. So what I'm going to do is add the capability to filter the data before it fills up the table in Excel. And all I'm doing is typing in a label here called transaction year, and then this is what my year is going to be. I'll put 2017 just as a sample. And I format them. Generally, I format them a little bit so that the font's a little bit bigger and it's bold, and I center it, and I put a box around it so that it's that's a parameter. That's where I type in something to limit the output of the data. So I'm going to take the filter off here. I'm going to put select all the dates again. But this year is going to be my filter. Okay. What we're going to do is go back to the query definition. Here's the command text. that's giving me every single column from the account transactions table, and I'm going to add a where condition. So this is in SQL parlance, this is a filter. And where, and I'm going to tell it that I want the year of the transaction date column. I want it to look at the year of the transaction date column, and if I just type it in here, 2017, and I click OK, it reruns the query. It's grabbing all the current data from GP, and it gives me the 2017. You know, I don't have it sorted, but I'll put it in order by date. And you know, we're got a fair number of rows there. Okay, what's the good of this here? In my query, back in the connection properties, instead of an actual physical year, because that's what will come up every time I open up this file, I'm going to put a question mark. Now when I hit OK, Excel expects a value for that parameter which was indicated by the question mark. Now instead of typing 2017 here, I'm going to use the, get the value from a cell on the spreadsheet. I'll click there, and that's the parameter that I want, and then I'm going to say use this value for future refreshes, so I don't have to remember where it is. Excel will remember for me. Then I'm also going to say refresh automatically when the cell value changes. Okay, now I click OK. It's running the background query. Now what is being returned here is just the data from 2017. You'll notice that if I go to the bottom here, and it's 4445, this is not a filtered view. When we had all 22,000 transactions, and I chose the year 2017, well, it hid all the other rows, but the rows were still there. Now, this spreadsheet has just the data for 2017, and the resulting amount of data is quite a bit smaller. So when this sheet opens up, and there's one thing that I should do to make sure that it refreshes when it opens, I go back to my connections here, and there is a property on the first tab where refresh data when opening the file. I click that, and then I'll click OK. So now when I open the file, it will look at this parameter and filter out the data based on that year. So you can put in multiple conditions in the query for Excel by just adding on to the query statement. I've got where, and I can put and for a second parameter, and I can put, I don't know, I don't want to put journal number, journal entry, but I can say, since I see some journal entries there, I'll do that just for demonstration purposes. And journal entry, and this time I'll say between question mark and question mark, and click OK. It's expecting more parameters, so I'll put in 2577 for now, just for a value to use, and then it asks me for the next one, and I'll put 2580. Okay, it runs the query and selects the data. Now I not only have 2017 data, but I've only got journal entries from 2577 through 2580. That's all the data that has been retrieved from GP. I can put in here journal entry from, and I'll put 2577, and then I'll put 2 and 2580 right there, and I'll do my normal formatting, put the box around it, increase the size the data, make them bold, make them centered, and I'll make sure that these labels are right aligned, like that. Now, these cells here are not paid attention to right away, but I can go back into my query, into the properties, go back to the definition, and there's a parameters tab down here at the bottom. So I've got 1, 2, 3 parameters. Now, Excel doesn't let you name the parameters so that you can tell them apart. All it says is parameter 1, 2, and 3. If I click there, I see it's got the list. Now, you heard Sean mention that he would like to see the tab list available as a dockable little dialog box. I would love if the parameters in a query could be named so I could tell them apart. All I have now is the location on the sheet. Okay, parameter 2, there's nothing there. So I'm going to get the value for this parameter from that cell. And then I'm going to get the parameter for this one from this cell. I'm not going to check these boxes to refresh automatically when the cell value changes, because it'll change, whenever I change any one of these three. If I have that box checked for all three, right now it's only the year. However, I can still use those. So, I don't know, do we have a 2590? I'll go to 2590. What this means is that I need to refresh the workbook. On the Data tab, there's a Refresh All. I click that, and it refreshes the data, and now you see the range of the journal entries goes to 2590. Okay, that is as far as I'm going to go with this. I wanted to make it about a half an hour. What we're going to, this is being recorded, so you can go over this process again, and also the template file. I will provide that as a download in the Green Bay library on GPUG.com, and I will also change the query parameters, or the connection string in particular, because it says SQL Server and the server is my server. Well, you don't have that server. I can take out the user ID, leave the trusted connection in. I can take out the Microsoft Office and the workstation ID and leave the database, but I'll change this to be enter database here, and up here will be something like enter your server name here. All right, the other two parameters can stay the same, but then this will work just champion. I'll save it with those parameters, then you go in, you change those, then you save your template as a name that you want to use. All right? Pam, anyone have any questions?
Not that I see, but I do have a comment.
Sure.
So being the database administrator at my office here, and knowing people will try this on their live data, the one thing I would do with my template is where you have select star, I would have select top 1000 star for your template. Meaning it's only going to bring in the top 1000, so you don't accidentally try to pull in a million lines. You can remove that once you've figured out what columns you want in your SQL statement. So yeah, mine.
That's what she's talking about.
Template would be select top 1000 stars from whatever view you're looking at, and then you can remove that because you may or may not want more than the top 1000, but that will keep you from possibly slowing not only your Excel, but the server or the SQL database.
Yes, and the DBA, the database administrator, will find you if
Yeah, so,
will find you and visit just punishments on you if you take up too much of the server cycles. So that,
and this,
go ahead.
once you figure out what the columns you want, and then how many there should be, or put your date parameters in there or whatever, you can remove that. I've accidentally forgotten to move it or remove that, but you will want to remove it at some point.
Right. And this particular view, the account transactions, has a lot of columns too. We're out to column DQ, and most of these you're not going to need. A lot of them are blank. A lot of them have the same value in every single row, but it will help you. You know, if you need the batch number, if you need the transaction source, you can retain that in your query. And of course, the columns can be formatted. This is not formatted as dollars. You know, whatever way you want. It's just Excel. It's just behind the scenes in getting the data from GP. That's where your connection to the SQL Server occurs. All right. So now I'm going.
I have a question.
And who is this?
This is Sethin Casper.
Hi, Sethin.
Hi. I have a question about your parameters. So you were saying that it just names them parameter 1, parameter 2, and so on. And the location, it would just say, you know, like B1. Could you just name your cell, and then that way the location would give you a little bit more, like, you know, of what it is?
Let's see. I'm going to name this. Go into the formulas and name manager and make a new one. And I'm going to call it, it's called transaction year. Somehow it figured out what it was. For the workbook, it refers to cell B1 and click OK. So now my name range is transaction year. And if I go into my parameter definitions and I change this to trx underscore year, different kind of value than what was provided. Okay.
Otherwise, could you try clicking on that cell again, and maybe it won't do B1 because you can hit that little arrow that's pointing up, and then it maybe will select it.
Let's see. It's going to go with the absolute reference. That was a good question. I never thought of that, of using a named range for a particular cell to make this parameter list a little easier to deal with. As it is, you got to remember which one is which. You do have the cell address, and so those are visible. But thank you for that question. That was a heck of a good question. Sorry I couldn't give you a good answer right away.